She thought she had control. She believed she was doing her job by the book. But when Officer Rachel Morgan struck a black driver during what should have been a routine traffic stop, she would soon discover how dangerous assumptions could be and how they could destroy everything. The night had been quiet, the kind of shift Rachel preferred. It was late, just past 10 p.m., and traffic through this part of Brookhaven, Ohio, had slowed to a quiet trickle. She sat alone in her cruiser parked at the edge of an empty strip mall parking lot, engine idling softly, the street lamps humming overhead. Occasionally, a car would pass by, headlights sweeping over the pavement, disappearing into the distance. Rachel sipped her coffee, half watching the road ahead, when something caught her eye. A sleek, black sedan glided through the intersection a few blocks ahead. It was one of those high-end models that gleamed even under dim sodium lights. Foreign, polished, expensive. The kind of car that belonged in a gated suburb, not cruising through this part of town after dark. Nothing about the vehicle screamed trouble, at least not at first glance. It maintained the speed limit. Its tires hugged the lane perfectly. But as it turned left at the next intersection, Rachel noticed something. No turn signal. Technically, it was a violation. Minor, barely worth mentioning on any other day. But tonight, Rachel felt like reminding people that rules were rules, that they still mattered. Maybe it was the monotony of her shift. Maybe it was the quietness of the night. Either way, she found her hand sliding the cruiser into gear as she pulled onto the street, following the car. She didn't speed. Didn't need to. A quick flick of the lights, and the sedan's brake lights flared red before it pulled smoothly over to the side of the road, tires brushing the curb with precision. Rachel took her time getting out of the cruiser. Her hand rested on her duty belt, thumb tapping absently at the radio attached to her shoulder. The neighborhood was still. A few porch lights shone from distant houses, but otherwise, it was quiet. The kind of quiet that could either be peaceful or unnerving. As she approached the driver's side window, the glass slid down with a mechanical hum. Inside, behind the wheel, sat a black man in his mid-40s. His beard was neatly trimmed, his hair close-cropped, flecked with gray. He wore a tailored navy suit, the fabric too fine for discount stores. A crisp white shirt, gold cufflinks that gleamed faintly beneath the streetlights. There was no chaos to him. His movements were calm, deliberate, controlled. His hands rested flat on the steering wheel at 10 and 2. His eyes, dark and steady, glanced her way with quiet attentiveness. Rachel felt something tighten in her chest. She didn't like his expression. Not nervous, not apologetic, just waiting. License and registration, Rachel said, her tone firmer than necessary. The man blinked once before turning, slow and deliberate, reaching toward the glove compartment. "May I ask," he said, his voice smooth, even, "why I'm being stopped tonight, officer?" Rachel shifted her weight, crossed her arms. Failure to signal a turn back there. A beat passed. A quiet breath escaped the man's nose. "Did I?" he asked, without sarcasm, without challenge. But there was something there, a quiet, poised scrutiny she didn't like. "License and registration," Rachel repeated. Without another word, he produced both documents and handed them over. His movements were precise, not rushed. There was no trembling in his hands, no fumbling for explanation. He didn't seem afraid. He wasn't sweating. And somehow, that unsettled her more. She glanced at his license, reading the name barely before flipping it back toward herself. Daniel Reese. The attitude, calm, confident, itched at her. It irked her. People didn't act like that when they were pulled over at night, not in Brookhaven, not in front of her. "You live around here?" she asked. Daniel exhaled softly, not quite a sigh, but close. "I don't see how that's relevant." Rachel's fingers tightened around his ID. 15 years on the job. She knew when someone was testing her. Knew when someone thought they were above the rules. "Step out of the vehicle," she said. For the first time since she'd walked up to his window, Daniel's expression changed. His jaw set. His head tilted slightly, just a fraction. "Why?" "I asked you to step out," she said, her tone sharper now. There was a pause. A flicker of tension at the corner of his mouth. But then Daniel Reese sighed again, unbuckled his seatbelt, and pushed the car door open with deliberate calm. Rachel took a half step back as he stood, taller than she expected, broader, not threatening, but imposing. Even his posture was measured, disciplined. She gestured toward the back of his car, hands on the trunk. Daniel exhaled through his nose, slow, deliberate, before turning and placing his palms flat on the cool metal. Rachel's heart was pounding now, faster than it should have been. This was the moment she was supposed to reassert control, remind him who was in charge. Remind herself. She stepped closer, placing a firm hand against his back, guiding him to bend just slightly lower. He stiffened, and that's when something inside her snapped. Before she registered the movement, before her mind caught up to her body, her palm cracked sharply across his cheek. The sound echoed in the empty street like a gunshot. Daniel's head jerked to the side. His body froze. Rachel's breath hitched. She stared at her hand, realizing what she'd just done. The night seemed to hold its breath with her. Then, slowly, Daniel Reese turned his head back toward her. His face was unreadable. His jaw clenched once before he took a steady breath. And then, in a deliberate, measured movement, he reached into his inner jacket pocket. Rachel's stomach twisted. Her hand hovered near her holster, but instead of a weapon, Daniel Reese withdrew a leather badge wallet and flipped it open, holding it up where she could see Nathaniel Reese, Chief of Police. Her superior. Her pulse roared in her ears. The name and title blurred together in her vision, even as her mind screamed for clarity. She had just struck her boss. Nathaniel Reese stood there, holding up his ID, watching her with the same calm, patient stare he'd had since the beginning. But now it was different. Now she realized what she had done, and he wasn't saying a word. Rachel felt her throat close. Her hands went numb. Her legs threatened to give way under her. Chief Reese. She began. But the sentence died before it left her lips. There was no finishing it, no excused, no defense. Before she could gather herself, a voice cut through the silence. Everything okay here, Officer Morgan? Rachel turned sharply. Another patrol car had pulled up behind hers. The familiar figure of Officer Jake Bennett stood beside it, his eyebrows drawn together in confusion as he glanced between her and Nathaniel Reese. She opened her mouth to answer, but Reese spoke first. Everything's fine, he said smoothly, slipping his badge wallet back into his jacket pocket. Your officer was just conducting a routine traffic stop. Bennett's gaze narrowed. Sir, am I free to go? Reese asked Rachel directly, his eyes steady on hers. Rachel hesitated. This was the moment. The decision point. Say yes and hope he let it go. Say no and make it worse. She swallowed hard. Yes, sir, she said quietly. Reese nodded, almost like a dismissal. Good to see some professionals still work in this department, he added, glancing at Bennett before stepping back toward his car. Rachel couldn't move. Not as the black sedan pulled smoothly away from the curb and disappeared down the street. Not as Bennett walked over and stood beside her. Rachel, he said carefully. What the hell was that? She couldn't meet his gaze. Just a stop, she muttered. Bennett shook his head. Just a stop? You look like you've seen a ghost. She said nothing. He let out a slow exhale. I'll write it up. You good? No. Yeah, she lied. But she wasn't. Nathaniel Reese had let her walk away. And that, she knew, was far worse than any punishment he could have handed out in the moment. She barely slept that night.